All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, right. You don't hear me amplified. It's for the media. I'm Haley Wood. I'm the director of the Hadley Senior Center. I'm really happy to have a really pretty nice turnout tonight. I invited Jim Maximowski from the Planning Board and also the Housing Production Plan Committee, and some of his Housing Production Plan Committee colleagues are here to present pull out some information from the housing production plan to share with you tonight. And then I thought I would complement what Jim has to say about that plan with some parallel facts from the recently completed Hadley Age and Dementia Friendly Community Assessment and Action Plan, because there are many parallels that I think support each other. So I just want to introduce Jim. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for attending the event tonight. First of all, I'd like to give a little history of how this committee and plan was put together. Back in 2022, the Planning Board applied for a grant from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and it was approved. And that was to create, obviously, the housing production plan. The study and report had to be completed by the end of 2022, and approval is required by the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, and the Department of Housing, DHCD. I'm not sure what the full DHCD stands for. DH is Department of Housing Community Development?
Yep.
Okay. And anyways, with PPC and the committee designed a survey, and we had about 285 responses. The committee consisted of Andrew Gnotik, Dave Story, myself, Mark Howard, Molly Keegan, Sean Barry, and Ken Comia and Lori Tanner from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and Lauren Hannigan, a non-voting member from the Senior Center. The report, when it was completed, is about 42 pages long. There's about 39 pages of facts, definitions, and general information, and about 3 pages of recommendations at the end. And so I'd like to go over some of the facts, because some of the facts that were presented were, well, eye-opening. For example, it gives the median income in the town of Hadley of $86,960, just under $87,000 for the median income. Hampshire County is $73,500, and for the state is $84,385. So the Hadley median income is significantly higher than Hampshire County and reasonably higher than the state, which explains a few things. When the selectmen apply for grants, as well as other boards in town, we usually don't get approved because we are considered a wealthy community. These are facts. These aren't something that's made out of nowhere, but somehow Hadley falls in that category. The poverty rate in Hadley, even though the income is high, still has 6.7%, which is considerably lower than Hampshire County or the state. That's a good thing. However, Hadley is by no means non-poverty. Percent of people over 65, obviously almost 20%. Hampshire County, almost 18%, and the state is 17%. So there's a lot of elderly people in the town of Hadley, which probably doesn't come as a surprise to anybody, especially to Haley Wood over there.
Not really.
Quick back that for slide.
Sure.
And subsidized housing in Hadley. Now, if anybody's been watching the ZBA meeting on Monday, there is a proposal to convert the Econo Lodge in Hadley to affordable housing. And a 12.6% number of affordable housing is being continually used. That 12.6% is the 2010 census number. The 2020 census number is 11.9%. We have dropped. However, the 11.9% has not yet been certified by the state. So, but it's probably not going to be too much different than that. However, that is probably a more recent number. A little bit facts about Hadley. In Hadley, in the town of Hadley, there's 15,840 total acres. Of those acres, almost 5,800 acres are active farmland, or almost 37%. 95% of the farmland is protected by APR or combination APR in Chapter 61A. And 33% of Hadley is in the aquifer. Now you can't add 33% or 36% because a lot of the farmland is in the aquifer. However, there's a lot of land in Hadley between the aquifer and APR that is not unbuildable, but we want to keep it as unbuilt as we can for obvious reasons.
Can you know what APR stands for?
APR is the Agricultural Preservation Restriction, that a farmer or a landowner will put their land into it, and it is forever to be in farmland. And the only way it can be taken out of farmland is a vote by the town meeting and a vote by the state legislature. That's only happened once that I know of in the town of Amherst. There was a small parcel that was about, I want to say, no more than an acre and a half that was removed. It was on East Street, because they had a historic house in the front that they wanted to tear down and put a mansion, is the best way to say it. Joe's smiling because he knows where I'm talking. And the town didn't want the historic house taken down. So because from the house backwards, it was all APR. So they allowed them to take about, like I said, about an acre or two out of the APR so they could retain the historic house in the front and build their mansion in the back. And if you go down East Street and Northeast Street in Amherst, you'll see a red house. So you look for a mansion in the back of it. That's what I'm talking about. Let's see, got the committee members and that.
I do have that somewhere. Yep.
Members. Oh, and now regarding some of the housing, there is a definite shortage of housing in Hadley and in the area. That's not a secret to anybody. And this slide simply shows you some of the reductions of houses being built in the last 60 years. From 1960, you can see from 60 to about 1990, there was, 14 to 16, 18,000 houses being built, or not being built, available, produced within that time frame. That's what was available in 2000, the 2000 and 2010. The number of units has dropped significantly from available for each decade, and so there's some reduction in everything else in the housing. This is not just to have this is kind of for the area, I believe. Yeah, that was for the. I'm not sure which if it includes Hampshire County or just maybe some of the major towns. I don't. This was taken out of. This was not in this study. This was taken from a slide that from 1985 that Pioneer Valley Planning Commission presented as a presentation to us. And
I think that's all the data I had for you.
yes, I don't want to. At the end of I'll just go over some of the recommendations. There's approximately 3 pages of recommendations at the end of the report. One is, and most of these we refer to the planning board doing something. In fact, they're kind of responsible for all of them. And the first one is participation in a regional collaboration addressing housing development. And there's a whole definition. I won't go into the definition because it's lengthy and boring. But Hadley is already doing that. They would like number 2 is a statement of the characteristics of proposed residential or mixed-use development that would be preferred by the municipality. That's ongoing, and that was also part of the study, the survey that was undertaken as part of this proposing plan. Identification of zoning districts or geographic areas in which the municipality proposes to modify current regulation for the purpose of creating single housing individual units to meet its housing production goal. That one is to be studied. identification of specific sites for which the municipality will encourage development of affordable housing, and it lists three: Russell School, North Hadley Village, and Hampshire Mall. North Hadley Village has already been sold, and the new owners of that are proposing some sort of a mixed use, but they're studying what they would like to do and what is most economical for what the money they have to spend into it. So no decision has been made on that as far as the new owners go. They have talked to the planning board about what we would like to see, and we've given them a couple of ideas. Senior housing would be one, some affordability. If we put in some senior housing, we could probably use some of the housing trust fund to help encourage that a little bit. Number 5 is identification of municipally owned or housing authority owned parcels for which the municipality or housing authority commits to you to issue permits for requests for proposals to develop eligible housing. And this was, they have the Russell School, and there's the 131 Russell Street, and also the Russell School area, which has about 2 acres at it. And the only problem possibly with this one is that the housing authority wants nothing to do with being responsible for more housing. They have enough on their plate, and the state has told them that unless they develop it or own it, not to get involved with a third party. So that's just that's not a showstopper, because you could probably put out a request for a proposal if we decided to do that and find out it's worthwhile. Sunderland did that, and for their senior housing in the center, and the developer is 100% responsible for the inventorying, the bookkeeping of the people, making sure everybody qualifies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's not necessarily a showstopper once we get into the idea of looking behind it. And that's kind of a overview of the senior housing. Of the housing production plan. The selectmen approved this at their meeting in November by unanimous vote. The planning board approved this last night at their planning board meeting by unanimous vote. So the last step is to turn this over to PVPC, and the state has already approved the draft, but they haven't approved, I guess they have to approve it one more time after the 2 boards, which have already done. Kind of, I would think it's a formality, but you never know with the state. But I think Haley has some things she'd like to say.
So as I mentioned, I compiled some additional information from the Age and Dementia Friendly Hadley Community Assessment and Action Plan, because I think it really supports some of the findings and recommendations in the housing production plan. And I think it's important for people to be aware that the survey respondents who informed a lot of the content of, I'll call it the community assessment. They identified housing as the #1 issue of concern among older adults in Hadley. This slide I decided to just include because it's contextual, it's overall population, and the percentage of people who are 65 and older, which we've already shared. And I think it's really interesting to note that almost 40% of households in Hadley have at least one person over the age of 65, and that it's higher than the average for the county. So that's just a little bit of information there. So as I said, access to appropriate housing is the #1 concern that survey respondents identified. I pulled a few things that are in our report, including sort of the time frame that respondents are hoping that the town addresses the housing shortage, and the overall inability to downsize. I think it's important to note that this is consistent with findings of the 2017 master plan, and I'm pretty sure the updated version. And the chief challenge with housing is housing supply, not enough smaller housing units in Hadley for those who want to downsize. This is repeated report after report after report. So I think it's pretty clear that housing diversity would greatly assist older adults who want to continue to live in Hadley. It's probably not a surprise to most of you to also know that both homeowners and renters are housing cost burdened, meaning that they pay over 30% of their income on housing. So that's important to be aware of. And I think it's also relevant to the discussion of housing to be aware that 35% of people over the age of 65 in Hadley live alone. Living alone in a 3-bedroom home becomes harder and harder. This is something that we see all the time. So here again, yeah, 14.2% of households. Let's see. Yeah, so both, basically, long and short of it is both renters and homeowners in Hadley, older adults, are burdened with the cost of housing. This comes from the Housing Production Plan. Reliance on a narrow range of housing types may become problematic in the future. In the near term, as household sizes continue to shrink and the population ages, many longtime residents may find themselves with oversized homes and seek smaller and maintenance-light housing. Since there are few market rate units geared to small households and individuals in Hadley, these households may choose to leave town. For me, that is a sobering fact. I want to also share some information about homeless and unsheltered people living in Hadley. There's a difference between people who are living outside and homelessness in general. A lot of people who are homeless are couch surfing, living in temporary housing options, staying with friends or family members on a temporary basis. We serve people in that situation on a regular basis, and so it's an ongoing concern for us at the Senior Center to need to want to have more resources to help housing insecure people and people who are on the verge of being homeless. So I asked Michelle LaFleur, who's the data and evaluation manager for the Continuum of Care program run by Community Action Pioneer Valley, to give me some numbers about the point in time count. Maybe most of you know about this. In January every year, HUD asks homeless agencies that assist homeless people to do a count of people living outdoors, unsheltered people, on one night in January. It's not a very good night to choose to really get an accurate number of people who are unhoused, in my opinion, but that's when they do it. And in Hadley, this past January, 2023, there were 3 people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. They were all, and I asked for age ranges, so that's also highlighted here. One was between 35 and 44, one was between 45 and 54, and one was between 55 and 64. I asked that because the fastest growing demographic of homeless people in the country are older adults. This is data taken from a report called The Emergency Crisis of Aged Homelessness. The top line indicates the study results for Boston, but what you can see is that between 2017 and 2030, and they used models to project homelessness, there's a steep incline. And I just want you to also be aware that the total homeless persons in Massachusetts in 2022 is 15,507. So we do have plenty to think about and deal with in regards to the homeless population. And people who are housed who might want to make a different kind of selection as they age in order to stay in the town that they love.
There was an interesting article about 2 weeks ago in the Daily Hampshire Gazette comparing, you know, as there's no easy answer to this, first of all. I mean, no matter where you go in Hampshire County, Hadley's probably one of the least expensive communities to live in, everything else considered, especially regarding taxes. There was an article, how many of you saw it in the Gazette about 2 weeks ago about tax, a gentleman, it had to be written, it was a op-ed written by an Amherst resident. I said, this person has to be from Amherst because Hadley wouldn't write this. And it compared taxes paid in Amherst for a home, about an average price, compared to Hadley, the average price of a home in Amherst and an average price of a home in Hadley, and what Hadley has gotten over the last few years and what Amherst has not. And almost Amherst is paying, they were both based on approximately, the value of the house was, I want to say, within $10,000-$15,000 for the average home price. The taxes paid in Hadley were not quite half of what Amherst pays. And they made a note at the end that for this huge difference in taxes, I think the Amherst Hadley tax rate was, some taxes paid for a year was, I want to say, about 46 or 4,800. I don't remember exactly. The Amherst was a little over 8, almost 9,000 for the same, almost the same value house. And over the last several years, for this modest tax rate of Hadley, they have gotten a new senior center, a new library. There was something else that was mentioned, and that was what Hadley has gotten for these prices, and what Amherst has gotten, nada. And so it was an interesting comparison about fiscal restraint and use, I guess, good use of town funds, and they didn't really draw any conclusion out of this, but they just made a mention that how much less expensive it is to live in Hadley compared to Amherst. And it was, like I said, it was an interesting article. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not going to try to get into philosophies and why it is, but it was just, it's expensive, bottom line, no matter where you want to be. Questions? Okay. Okay. Somebody got to have questions. No?
I'm Jerry Harvey. I live in North Hadley. We've been here 20 years. I followed the pros and cons about the conversion of housing, perhaps at Econo Lodge. And there was lots of objection to it. So I think, well, it's really important. We just looked at all the plans, and it seems like it's really important to go forward. I mean, I could imagine myself wanting a smaller place also. And there are lots of other people who are in the same situation. We're talking about the homeless. So how do we move forward on this?
Good question. There is no, with the price of housing, the price of building, put it that way, with the price of building going out of sight, if anybody believes that we could rezone Hadley and simply say we're going to allow apartments and it's going to solve a problem, they're delusional. This was brought up a couple of years ago at a meeting that I was at. People were saying they'd like to see apartments permitted in Hadley by right, or at least allow apartments. And I was ready for that question because I had talked to 2 developers from the area that build apartments. And both of them said they would love to build apartments in Hadley because they could get top dollar. So if you build apartments in Hadley, all you're going to do is get more housing, but it's not going to be any stretch probably more affordable. That's the problem, that just because we say we'd allow apartments, they're still going to, I'll give you an example. We're across from Ginger Garden in Amherst on Snell Street, at the corner of Snell Street and Route 9, where they're putting those houses in. A studio apartment there A studio, one-bedroom apartment is going for almost $2,000 a month. And that's the low end. So those are recently put in. They're expensive as all get out. I mean, you could almost put a mortgage on a small house for a couple, well, almost for that price, almost. So it's not an easy it's not an easy answer to try to say how are we going to getting more housing is going to get more housing, but it's going to be expensive. So we're not going to solve a problem by simply putting in more units. We need to figure out how to make units affordable that we do put in. And in this climate, I'll be honest, I don't know how we will do that. Well, yeah, I mean, if the state was to come across with buckets of money, that would be one thing. But that's not likely to happen. But you never know.
Well, the chronological.
Yes.
So one of the things that I said on the Housing and Economic Development Committee, Sean is on the committee with me as well. And one of the things that we're going to be we just started talking about, but we're going to be talking about in more earnest, is visioning. And what I mean by that is at some point, we have to take the long view. To Jim's point, this is not going to be resolved overnight. There may be a project here or there that moves us in the right direction, but we do have interest from the University of Massachusetts in providing free resources to us that we otherwise don't really have the funds to afford, to work with people in the planning area who are interested in working with a cross section of people between the planning board, our committee, and eventually expanding it out to start thinking about what's the zoning that we have today, and then where might we be able to do some, I'm going to call it infill development or changes along the Route 9 corridor in particular that might be attractive to meeting the demands of the master plan, the age and dementia friendly plan that just came out, as well as the housing production plan. So again, that's not going to change overnight, but we think that might be a way to go to start involving more people in the conversation about what they'd like to see and where they'd like to see it. And again, it's a conversation. It's not intended to drive any zoning changes. The planning board absolutely needs to be in charge of that, but hopefully it will engage more people in the dialogue about it. So just mentioning that that's something that's going to be happening.
Thank you. My name is Laura Baker. I work at the Valley Community Development Corporation. We're the proposed developer for the Econo Lodge project people have mentioned tonight. I just wanted to comment on one thing that I thought was striking about the housing production plan is since I think between 2000 and 2020, the only building permits issued in Hadley were for single family homes. I think there were about 230 single family homes that were built. Sure. I know. So between 2000 and 2020, there were only single family building permits issued in Hadley. So no other housing type was constructed. There were no two families, three families, or multifamilies. So the multifamilies that do exist in Hadley now are dated. They were built before that time period. There are about 238 single family homes built in that period. One of the comments in the housing production plan was that Hadley needs more housing of a variety of types, including multifamily and single family. And so it seems like there is some success in Hadley in building single family. I know there's a new senior housing over 55 development that I believe is 32 single family units. But there really hasn't been any multifamily development here at all in a very long time. That's all I wanted to comment on.
Yes. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for this. One, years ago, well, we'll say years ago. Let's go with today's climate. Forget what happened 50 years ago. Under title, Hadley is 33% aquifer. That means if you want to build a house on the aquifer for each bedroom, and you're not on sewer, and most of Hadley's not on sewer, and most of the aquifer is not on sewer except for Route 9 and a portion of 47. So if you want to build a single family home over the aquifer, you need 10,000 square feet of land for each bedroom. Hadley has 40,000 square foot building lots. So with a 40,000 square foot building lot, that means you could build a 4-bedroom house. If you want to build a duplex that has 6 bedrooms, you need 1.5 acres, and so on and so forth. That's Title V. That's a state code. That's not Hadley zoning. That's the state. Title V was the state sanitary code. People talk about, well, we want to put in this and this and this. Well, you want to do cluster zoning. Okay, cluster zoning, but you fall into the same category. And they say, well, you can put in, you could, excuse me, you could put in what they call a public septic system. So you could cluster the homes on a portion of the property, and you could take all of that sewer or septic and pump it to a private septic system. Okay, that sounds good, but still, you still need the 10,000 square feet of land for each bedroom. So were you really going to accomplish anything? Probably not. The other problem plus the Board of Health years ago took a stand. Public septic systems are not permitted in the town of Hadley. Reason for that is it's a concept. All septic systems fail. Nobody can deny that. Sooner or later, it's going to fail. They're not on sewer. So you now have public septic system, probably, let's say, reasonably, 6 or 7 homes. Suddenly, their septic system fails. If they don't have open land to build a new septic system, what do? Leave the homes, abandon them, bring sewer? Hadley, the furthest point in Hadley, within most of the areas that you could put a public septic system in that's not on sewer, there's 2 to 3 miles away from a sewer line. The cost of running a sewer line 2 or 3 miles is insane. You're talking millions of dollars. It cost Hadley, between Hadley and I guess some sort of state money, something like $800,000 to run a water line along South Maple Street from the bike path to the intersection of Mill Valley and South Maple, probably a distance of maybe, I doubt it was a half a mile, more like maybe a third of a mile. And the price of construction, that all fits into the price of construction. So there's a lot of great ideas that are out there. And when you get into the details, they cancel, unfortunately, a lot of these out. And, the idea of the infill on Route 9, yeah, because you're on sewer, there's probably some good merit there. How do you do it? It's also prime business land. There's give and take in all of this. So like I said, there's absolutely no easy answer. And to do some studies by some group might be most welcome to find out, does this make sense? Because, yeah, we can say, yeah, this is a great idea. Well, now all of a sudden you get details. Oh, boy, we're going to spend how much? What's it going to cost? And it's going to be insane. And, Hadley's a frugal community. Been that way. I don't see it changing in the near future. Thank goodness for a lot of us. And for those of us that are here, we're lucky. And the problem is, some of our kids wanting to move into town or young people, it's ridiculous. But that's any place in this area too. It's not just Hadley. Go to Amherst, it's even worse. And Northampton, the surrounding towns are beginning to feel the same crunch now. For a while there, some of the Franklin County towns were a little bit immune to this. Well, because we're crunched. It's spreading out to them and they're getting crunched now. So it's, and if you think we're bad, go to the Boston area. Other questions, comments? Nothing? Okay. Good game, Hopkins boys, last night. You fought hard. You came close. Congratulations. Oh, there's nothing else. Thank you. Thank you.
Gosh, I don't know, almost 30 years. Um,
Oh, a newcomer.
yeah, I know. My Irish husband said the only reason he could live here was because I was Polish. But anyways, um, so it sounds kind of hopeless to me. My husband passed away last year, and I'm a single person, 72 years old, living in a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house on 3/4 of an acre. And I'd like to downsize. And it seems like my only option is to move out. I love my home. I love Hadley. It's where I'd like to be. But when you say, this is going to cost septic, this is going to do this, I'd love to see a condo. I mean, I would love not to have to shovel or not to have to mow my lawn anymore. But what you're saying just makes me feel very hopeless for myself and others who are over 65 who may be in a similar situation. There has to be some kind of resolution or some kind of, I don't know.
Never say never, but it's a tough answer to give you. I mean, even the recent senior housing that went in on East Street, for downsizing. Okay, the houses are downsized, but the prices are upsized.
It is true.
And I'm not gonna pick on anybody. I'm just gonna make a general statement. This is kind of Joe's favorite story. When Mr. Roberts first proposed these buildings, his base price for the house was about $250,000. Had a meeting with some people. Okay, this is the base price, and this is what you're going to get. Okay, well, we want a basement. We want this. We want this. We want this. And before you know it, the houses are now $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. So yeah, they may have downsized, but you certainly didn't downprice. And the only thing that granted people that live there get, if you would, the sidewalks are shoveled, everything is taken care of, the outside of the houses are maintained. But they pay a reasonable fee for that. I agree. You're in a tough situation. I do not disagree one bit, and the answer isn't easy. Joe. 920 square feet in law apartments. Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, there is an option. There is where you've got a 4-bedroom house. You said you may be able to create what we call an in-law apartment. The actual wording in the bylaw is accessory apartment. If you could somehow split part of your house out, you could make it a 2-family house as long as the owner lived there, and you could the maximum size for an accessory apartment is 900 square feet, and you could make essentially a 2-family house out of it. You could live, if you wanted, in either the smaller portion or the larger portion, and rent out the other portion.
Yeah.
Your house, and that can be done to any house in town.
For a price.
Only 2. That's correct. No, it's 2. It's a 2 youth, only 2.
Couldn't make it a separate place. That was what, so it changed somewhere in that time. But thinking about building, in a 2,400 square foot apartment, building 4 bedrooms. So why can't we make it so there would be 4 units there. I mean, even on some of these lots, then you still have that same requirement for a sewer, right? 4 bedrooms, if there are 4 units, each one with a bedroom.
We haven't thought of gone so far as to make it. Right now, we're only allowing an accessory apartment.
Right, I know. But I'm saying that would be a way, I would be, if the limiting factor is this, what, 10,000 square feet for,
What the
One
accessory
bedroom?
apartment, the accessory apartment can be a maximum.
I know,
of
that's a lot, but
900
I'm
square
saying if
feet.
we're gonna have a new,
Title V.
Well, most of the places that are converting or doing this, they're, except for a newer home. But when they build there are new homes that are being built with accessory apartments as part of the design. And they are complying with the Title V 10,000 square feet per bedroom.
right, because one of the bedrooms is this accessory apartment.
Correct.
So if we changed our law, our zoning, you can't do that. You couldn't make 4. The state says we couldn't have 4 units on a property.
I have a
No.
4-bedroom house, and I'm trying to figure out how I would turn that into a 4-unit.
Yeah.
Yes, that conversion, but suppose you were going to build it.
Logistic.
But
Typically,
we start out and build it that way.
Typically, converting a home into 2 separate units isn't too difficult because you usually give up a couple of rooms. To take a 4-bedroom house and make it 4 units would, I mean, I'm not going to say it's certainly possible, but we haven't thought about that one. I'll be honest. We haven't thought about doing that one. We haven't thought about anything more than the 2, because that's where. Well, that's what most people are looking for.
I was thinking if you start new construction,
Yeah, the other problem you might run into with that, with the 2 units in a dwelling, it's very manageable. If you start doing 4 1-bedroom apartments, you might end up, as our favorite word is, student stuffers from UMass, and that's what we want to avoid.
well, that's where we have 8 or 10 students on one house, right? I mean, that's what we have now.
8 or 10 students.
Yes, potentially. But I'm thinking if it were administered, it would be a land use.
It's relatively easy to administer one accessory apartment. I mean, like I said, we haven't thought about more than 1 accessory apartment in a dwelling.
Well, generally, that would be enough if you're already requiring the homeowner to live there, which is a big thing because as we age, maybe we don't want to be invested in. We would love to have that apartment, but maybe not own the whole thing.
So I just wanted to come back to the question about hopelessness. I think that lots of periods where I'm actually quite optimistic. And I think that there are a lot of good things happening in Hadley right now. We're having this conversation for one. 5 years ago, we weren't talking about this. So the fact that the housing production plan has been put forth, part of the driver behind that is that it will, it's a checkbox at the state level that will give us more access and more likelihood to obtain grant money to start thinking about visioning, rezoning, et cetera. And it's resources that the planning board hasn't had access to. We don't have a town planner. So again, we're a city effectively, the way that we operate, with no town planner, which is a resource that all of our neighbors have. So that's one thing. And I think, coming back to this idea of, you having to take a long view because there is an ordering of things. As Jim was talking about, the logical place for development is along the Route 9 corridor. We're actively working on potential sewer solutions that will kind of remove some of the obstacles. But again, these things are going to take time. But I think Hadley's a very practical town. I've always found town meeting to be utterly practical. And the bottom line here is we need to figure out a way to increase the tax base because we've pretty much run out of ways to decrease spending. And we all know that we're in a pretty high inflationary cycle. So if people want to continue to enjoy having lower taxes than our neighbors for a prolonged period of time, we need to get a little bit more creative. And I think the way to, personally, I think the way to do it is to focus on the top line, which is increasing property tax revenue, which I think will drive some more, again, planned, focused development along the Route 9 corridor. It's just not going to happen overnight. But I think there's a lot more momentum to get us there. So I am hopeful. And I'll tell you, we have developers that are really just coming at us right now, trying to find ways to put housing stock in because everybody is reading the tea leaves and everybody's trying to do the right thing. So I think there's going to be immense pressure to move some of those ideas forward. So it might happen.
One of the things I forgot to mention is what does this housing production plan that was just prepared and completed get for Hadley, which is fairly important. And this is reading right from the plan itself. There are two major benefits for a community to have a housing production plan that is certified by DHCD. First, communities with approved and certified housing production plans are given preference over non-housing production plan communities for certain state grant funds. Second, a municipality can retain its local authority to require developers to comply with zoning and wetlands laws and avoid Chapter 40B comprehensive permit so long as the municipality has an approved and certified HPP in place and is making progress towards the 10% goal at the rate of 0.5% per year. Hadley exceeds, like I said at the beginning, the 10%, but it is slowly decreasing over time, so we can't sit on our laurels and ignore that. But that's why one of the things with the Econolodge coming in, if we weren't at 10%, Econolodge would be essentially approved already, converted, and Hadley would not be able to negotiate with that. One of the things that's amazing about the override, they call it a friendly 40B and unfriendly. A friendly 40B is what we're seeing with Econolodge. The zoning board is the granting authority. They're the clearinghouse. They can negotiate with developer, say, hey, well, we would like this. They're going to be reasonable. It can't be ridiculous. We would like to see this. We would like to see certain things in the plan. And most times the developer, as long as they're reasonable, they will agree with that. If it's an unfriendly 40B, the developer can come into town and say, we're going to do this, and they're almost guaranteed to do it. And not only can they override zoning, they can override wetlands. They don't have to comply with the wetlands laws as well. That was a shock to us that we didn't realize until recently. And that unto itself can create, I don't know how ridiculous they could be. I don't want to find out. So we just want to keep our head above the 10%, and we want to maintain and do what we can reasonably to go forward with affordable housing when a reasonable one comes along. Thank you. We all done now? Thank you for coming.